In a world where we carry our entire lives in our pockets, where we trust glowing screens to guide our finances, our health, our memories, and our hearts, it's worth asking an uncomfortable question. A question that sits quietly beneath the swipes, the matches, the hopeful notifications, and the late-night conversations. Should dating apps require background checks? At first, the question sounds extreme. It might even sound intrusive. Some will hear it and immediately think of privacy, freedom, and the right to start fresh. Others will hear it and think of safety, accountability, and protection. And right there, in that tension, is where this conversation truly begins. Because this is not just about dating apps. This is about trust in the digital age. This is about how much responsibility technology has when it invites strangers into our most intimate spaces. This is about how far we are willing to go to protect ourselves and each other in a world that moves faster than our instincts can keep up with. Dating apps didn't just change how we meet people. They changed how we assess risk. For most of human history, meeting someone new came with layers of social context. You met people through friends, family, work, community, shared spaces. There were witnesses to character. There were reputations that traveled faster than lies. There were social consequences for harmful behavior. Today, you can meet someone who lives 10 minutes away, who knows your favorite song, who has seen photos of your childhood dog, who can say all the right things, and still be a complete stranger. And we call that normal. We normalized meeting people we know nothing about, based on a handful of curated photos and a short bio designed to impress. We normalized trust without verification. We normalized vulnerability without safeguards. And when something goes wrong, we often ask the wrong question. We ask, why didn't they see the red flags? We ask, why did they trust them? We ask, why didn't they leave sooner? But maybe the better question is this: why did we build systems that require people to gamble their safety just to find connection? Because dating apps are not neutral platforms. They are businesses. They profit from human longing, from loneliness, from hope, from the desire to be seen, chosen, and loved. And when a company profits from facilitating human connection, especially romantic and physical connection, it inherits responsibility whether it wants to or not. The truth is, dating apps already shape behavior. Algorithms decide who gets seen and who doesn't. Notifications are engineered to keep users hooked. Profiles are ranked, filtered, boosted, buried. Apps already influence our choices, our self-worth, our expectations of others. So let's stop pretending that requiring background checks would suddenly be an overreach. The real question is not whether dating apps have the power to implement safety measures. The question is whether they have the courage to prioritize people over profits. Opponents of background checks often argue that they violate privacy. And privacy matters. It truly does. But privacy has never meant freedom from accountability. We accept background checks in many areas of life without outrage. Teachers, caregivers, ride-share drivers, coaches, volunteers, even some workplaces that never involve physical contact. Why? Because we understand that when one person is placed in a position of access to another, especially in vulnerable contexts, some level of verification is not oppression. It's protection. Dating apps place people in exactly that position. They facilitate access to bodies, homes, emotions, and trust. Sometimes within hours of a match. Sometimes with alcohol involved. Sometimes with power, imbalances, age gaps, or emotional vulnerability. And yet we act shocked when harm occurs. We act as if it's unpredictable. It's not. There are countless stories. Stories of assault, of stalking, of fraud, of people discovering far too late that the person they trusted had a history of violence, manipulation, or abuse. Stories of survivors who blame themselves because the system never warned them. And those stories rarely go viral. They rarely make headlines. They are whispered in group chats, shared cautiously among friends, buried under shame and self-doubt. And that silence benefits no one except the systems that refuse to change. Requiring background checks would not eliminate harm. Let's be honest about that. No system is perfect, but it would send a message. A powerful one. It would say that safety matters. It would say that patterns of violence are not just personal mistakes, but social risks. It would say that your desire to date does not outweigh someone else's right to be safe. And perhaps most importantly, it would shift the burden. Right now, the burden of safety is placed almost entirely on the user. Usually women, often marginalized people. People are told to research, to Google, to stalk social media, to share locations, to carry safety tools, to meet in public, to trust their gut, to leave early. All of that advice is important. But it quietly implies something dangerous. That harm is your responsibility to prevent. Background checks would acknowledge what survivors have always known. That individual vigilance cannot replace systemic safeguards. Now let's talk about the fear that always surfaces next. What about people who have made mistakes? What about those who have changed? What about redemption? This is where the conversation becomes deeply human. Because yes, people grow. People heal. People transform. And a just society must leave room for that. But redemption does not mean erasure. Growth does not mean immunity from accountability. And change does not require secrecy. Background checks do not have to be simplistic. They can be nuanced, time-bound, focused on serious offenses, not minor infractions. They can allow transparency, context, and appeal. They can be designed with ethics, not punishment, at their core. The goal is not to shame people forever. The goal is to reduce preventable harm now. We already accept that some actions have long-term consequences. A history of violence, sexual assault, or repeated abuse is not a private quirk. It's a public safety concern. And ignoring that reality doesn't make us compassionate. It makes us complicit. There's also the argument that background checks would reduce users, hurt profits, and create barriers to connection. And that's probably true. But maybe fewer users is not a failure. Maybe fewer dangerous encounters is a success. Maybe fewer viral horror stories is progress. Maybe a slower, safer, more intentional dating culture is exactly what we need. Because let's be honest, the current system isn't working very well. People feel burned out, disposable, cynical, dehumanized. Swiping fatigue is real. Ghosting is normalized. Empathy is thinning. Trust is fragile. Adding accountability might actually restore something we've lost. A sense that the person on the other side of the screen is real, verified, and responsible for their actions. And here's something else worth considering. Background checks don't just protect potential victims. They protect everyone. They protect users from false identities, serial scammers, and professional manipulators. They protect people from investing emotionally in someone who is lying about their entire life. They protect honest users from being lumped in with bad actors. Trust is a two-way street, and systems that build trust create better outcomes for everyone involved. Some will argue that people with bad intentions will always find ways around systems. And yes, some will. But that argument has been used to oppose every safety measure in history. Why have laws if people break them? Why have locks if thieves exist? Why have seatbelts if accidents still happen? The answer is simple. Because prevention reduces harm. Because inconvenience for some is protection for many. Because doing nothing is a choice, and often the most dangerous one. Dating apps love to talk about empowerment. About choice. About giving people control over their romantic lives. But true empowerment requires information. True choice requires transparency. You cannot meaningfully consent to risk you are not allowed to see. And when platforms withhold information that could affect your safety, that is not neutrality. That is negligence. This conversation also forces us to confront a deeper truth about modern dating. We are asking technology to replace community. To replace social vetting. To replace the natural accountability that once came from shared spaces and relationships. And if we are going to outsource connection to algorithms, then those algorithms must carry some of the moral weight. We can't keep pretending that tech companies are just passive matchmakers. They design the environment. They set the rules. They decide what matters. If engagement metrics matter more than safety, that's a choice. If growth matters more than harm reduction, that's a choice. And choices reflect values. So maybe the question isn't should dating apps require background checks. Maybe the real question is what kind of culture do we want to build? One where connection is fast, cheap, and risky. Or one where connection is intentional, respectful, and safe. Because safety is not the enemy of romance. It's the foundation of it. You cannot fully open your heart when you are bracing for harm. You cannot be playful when you are calculating escape routes. You cannot build intimacy on fear. Imagine a dating culture where safety is assumed, not negotiated. Where trust is supported by systems, not just instincts. Where accountability is normal, not controversial. That doesn't kill romance. It makes it possible. And finally, let's talk about courage. Because implementing background checks would require courage. Courage from companies to risk backlash. Courage to admit that their platforms have enabled harm. Courage to prioritize long-term well-being over short-term profits. And courage from users to demand better. Every major social change begins with an uncomfortable question. This is one of them. We can keep swiping and hoping nothing bad happens. Or we can decide that hope is not a safety plan. That connection should not come at the cost of trauma. That technology should evolve with our values, not exploit our vulnerabilities. Background checks won't solve everything. But they are a statement. A statement that people matter more than metrics. That safety is not optional. That love, in the digital age, deserves protection. And maybe, just maybe, asking this question is the first step toward a dating culture that finally feels human again.